we'll work through this. So some of you I know, some of you I don't, or you may have heard me talk before, but I will be your host for the day, Marlene Stum from the University of Minnesota. My background is in family economics and gerontology. I have a real passion for later life families and calling attention to gerontology and particularly issues that protect financial security and family relationships across the generations, and have done a variety of work over the years. Today, we're going to focus on a topic that is near and dear to me in the last few years, particularly, and that's elder family financial exploitation. So with that, some basics. Again, I think most are quite familiar with Zoom and webinars by now, as we're thinking about almost a year of probably living in webinar land. But please mute yourself if you're not. I think you're automatically muted. We're going to primarily use the chat box today. Again, there's fewer of us on, and so I think that will allow us to really have more in and out and some dialogue. So I look forward to that. And as Lisa said, if you want the, please enter your email. And if you want to get the copy of the slides, and everyone will also get, as you know, the recording goes in, will be located on the North Central Region Aging Network website, so that you can pass the information on to others or find it yourself. So today we're going to focus on, as I said, elder family financial exploitation. And the topic is really focused on the role of concerned family members in the lives of victims. A little bit different slant, perhaps, than you've heard before. But here's what I want to cover and talk about with you. So I want to talk about what motivates concerned family members to get involved in help seeking, give you some sense of the roles and tasks that they get involved in, and as well as that, some of the costs and consequences of those family members. And as I think all of us on here are with Extension really thinking about prevention education and what are the implications of concerned family members as a target audience for content that we could perhaps support concerned family members with. So that's where I'm going. And I always feel compelled to start with making sure everyone's on the same page with definitions. There is a lot of, I want to say confusion, but there's a lot of ways to define financial exploitation. And there's really a couple of subsets that I'll talk about here. But one of them is elder family financial exploitation. I will call it EFFE. You'll hear that acronym as opposed to spitting out the longer phrase. And the working definition is really the illegal, unauthorized, or improper use of an elder's resources, which could be money, property, any kind of assets. In the case of familial exploitation, we're really talking about when a family member is the perpetrator. And when you look at the broad scope of elder abuse and the different types, EFFE is one of the most prevalent. So it's a major concern prevalence-wise and consequence-wise for folks. A common misconception, I think, is that most of the financial exploitation broadly is done by strangers. And again, just to clarify, that's really not the case. Not that stranger exploitation is not important and doesn't deserve attention, but a reminder that family is the most prevalent context. And again, this kind of comes back to when people talk about financial exploitation, or when you're looking at research on financial exploitation, it's really important to know whether you're looking at at a study, for example, of both stranger and family exploitation or one or the other. They have some similarities in those two subtypes, but they also have really distinct differences, differences in risk and protective factors, and in terms of education, what needs to happen. So it is important to know and to distinguish those. In today's webinar, we're going to focus on a subset, if I can say, of both elder financial exploitation and who we're talking about and whose perspective we're talking about. And you'll hear the term concerned persons. This term was actually coined by professional Risa Breckman out of the New York City Elder Abuse Center. She's a social worker by training and has been in the field a long time, does research and works with David Burns out of Cornell and a few other folks. And she has really called attention in the last few years to the role of concerned persons. And by concerned persons, she defines that as family, friends, and neighbors, and trying to call attention to the efforts and impacts that those individuals have, and really that invisible kind of informal network. So, as I said, EFFE is one of the most prevalent types of elder abuse. It has some major consequences for both victims and families and society. And yet, most of what's known about how to intervene is focused on formal systems. And even then, we don't know a lot about those formal systems and what they actually work, such as adult protective services or multidisciplinary teams. Those are what I mean by the formal services, you might think about the authorities that are out there. In this case, we're focused on the role of informal help seeking. So those who are not the authorities, who are not necessarily trained at all, but maybe stepping in to help. Keep in mind that the vast majority of all kinds of elder abuse, including EFFE, go unreported. So it's often that invisible, what we're trying to understand is invisible because it's not reported. So trying to figure out what is going on. And again, the work of Breckman and Burns is calling attention to that, recognizing that if you look at helplines that are out there for victims, often advertised for victims, many of the callers are actually adult daughters of the victims, the family members of the victims that are calling. And other work has shown that when concerned people are involved, that most of them are family members, and they are the ones who are helping connect the victims, the elders, to social services. So again, playing a critical role in either helping themselves, helping the elder themselves, or helping them connect to really critical social services. So those are some of the terms you'll hear me use. So concerned persons broadly refers to, again, a range of non-abusers, by the way. I didn't really say that, but we're not talking about the perpetrator in this case. They may consider themselves a concerned person, but we don't. And realize that Breckman and Burns' work focuses on all kinds of elder abuse, but again, highly recognize that the vast majority of cases they see and what they study is actually EFFE. So again, kind of sorting out what we know. There's this is a field where there's not a ton of research, and so it's a matter of kind of piecing together some evidence of, again, things from different, whether it's elder abuse broadly or financial exploitation more broadly or EFFE specifically. So I'm curious, when you think about help seeking and who might respond, what's your best guess here? when someone is aware of elder abuse, what percent of concerned persons do you think would engage in support and helping those victims? Enter if you want to enter in the chat, or again, I don't have my participant list up, but.
So we have got 85%, 30% in the chat box, 50%, 50% is what I was thinking. Another 50%, another 50%.
All right.
40. 3 50s, a 40, a 30, and 85.
Yep. You guys are good. Again, there's not been a lot of studies on this, but Breckman's work was a study that was a representative example in New York State. And what they found was 60% of individuals, when they were aware, again, this is of all elder abuse, not EFFE specifically, really were involved and willing to step in and help. And again, the point being, a lot of concerned persons are willing and able and to take on that role of help seeking, but yet we know very little about it. So that's the emphasis here, is what is it like to be a concerned person and trying to be involved in help seeking? And you may have seen this before if you've listened to me, but I think the vast majority of work in EFFE is focused on perpetrators and victims, and clearly we want to understand victims and perpetrators. But this is a piece of that puzzle from a family system vantage point that really is missing. Again, those concerned family members who are not the abusers, but they're can be dramatically affected. Again, from a family systems perspective, we know that EFFE doesn't just happen to that primary victim, but it also happens to family members across the generations. Well, you're going to hear me talk about some findings from a study that has been ongoing here at the University of Minnesota. And the broader purpose of the study is to understand how those concerned family members articulate the meaning and experience of EFFE. And I've shared a range of results over the years from that. Again, the perspective that we have is from that non-victim, non-perpetrator. We recruited individuals that were concerned family members. So again, I'm kind of throwing another term at you. You're going to hear me say CFMs. If I do that, you'll know what I'm talking about. Concerned family members. So again, kind of a subset of those concerned persons, knowing that family members are critical. So again, hopefully I'm not losing you in all these definitions, but this study focuses specifically on EFFE and concerned family members who are the non-abusers. So who are those individuals? What do they look like? Again, we know that in the case of EFFE, we're typically looking at an older parent who is the victim, one or more parents who are the victims. And in this case, the concerned family members that we recruited individuals who had experienced EFFE in their own family system, voluntarily came forward to tell their story. We actually had to stop interviewing people. We were hoping to talk with 15 and we stopped at 28, which was a nice problem to have as a researcher, but also interesting in many different ways to learn how many concerned family members really wanted to share their story, really needed that support, and wanted to help others avoid the issues they had. The concerned family members, as you can see here, were primarily adult children of the victim, again, the older parent, and they're primarily a sibling of that primary perpetrator. And you're going to think, what's a primary perpetrator? Well, what we learned in the study, and I'll talk a little bit more just briefly about this, that there's often multiple perpetrators. So think about this person as, again, a typical scenario would be an older parent who may be widowed, who is the main victim, and with multiple adult children. One is the perpetrator, another may be this concerned person. And in our study, we have, you can see the characteristics. These were folks that came forward, not just from Minnesota, but from other places. Primarily white, educated, married individuals. So again, this was not meant to be a representative sample at all, but in trying to get, again, some voices of those concerned family members that haven't been represented in the data. So that's the kind of context of who we talked with, whose perspectives you're going to hear from. So a lot of room for more research in this area. Please hear that in terms of understanding diversity and experiences. So as we go along, as I talk about what we've learned, I really want you to listen for the practical needs and issues that you're hearing. So when we think about the so what's here, think about what could we do as educators to help family members be more effective as an advocate for victims and to help make their role less stressful. So I encourage you to add things to the chat, to make your own little list. And a couple times during this, I'm going to pause, and I'm hoping that we can really have some good conversation about your perspectives and what you're hearing and seeing from what I share. So we're going to come back to this, but just want to encourage you to listen for that. So let's dive into what is it that makes concerned family members, those 60% in the one study, and as many of you were indicating, probably half or more may be willing to get involved. What is it that drives them? What's their motivators? What's their goals? What are they trying to accomplish? And what we found in this study, and again, this is similar to Berkman's work, is that the vast majority of concerned family members are not, if I can say, they're not in it for themselves, they're in it for protecting the victim. They really are an advocate for that victim. And they are frequently talking about, and will use the phrase, trying to do the right thing, in contrast to what they perceive as the perpetrator doing the wrong thing. And taking that on, our participants really talked about 5 major kind of goals or motivation. And the 3 at the top here, the most driving one, again, was really, or all 3 of the main goals in black that you see were focused on that victim, whether it's ensuring the victim's quality of life, honoring the victim's wishes, and protecting their financial security. Those are the 3, and I'm going to give you some examples of these. Secondarily, what concerned family members were also trying to do when possible was to protect the larger family relationships and to help address the perpetrator issues. So with that, let me give you some sense of what each of those meant. So ensuring victims' quality of life being broad, really trying to protect that older adult's health and well-being, focusing on their safety, their dignity, their respect, meeting their daily needs, stopping unacceptable treatment, really trying to protect the quality of life that oftentimes that older adult had planned for or hoped for, but wasn't really living at the time. So you can see some of the quotes here. I will let you read them. In particular, you can see in the last example, the last bullet, that family members, concerned family members, when they're trying to ensure the victim's quality of life, often get involved and are facing what's called polyvictimization. So what we know is that while while I say the study is focused on EFFE, in reality, the older victims may also be experiencing emotional abuse, physical abuse, or other kinds of abuse. And that's the reality that's out there. So that while we say they're uniquely different, they also happen at the same time. So while a family member may think they're tackling financial abuse, they may quickly learn, or not so quickly learn, that they're also facing all kinds of abuse. So protecting that victim's quality of life, again, stepping in to do that. Another critical piece is trying to honor and respect the victim's wishes. What is it? That means listening to that older person, really trying to understand what's important to them, what they want to have happen, respecting their self-determination and agency. People talked about that a lot, was really central. And trying, again, hard to honor those, even though you may not agree with them. Again, and we'll talk about some of the conflicts that family members face. You can see this list. Again, here's what victims often wanted. They wanted to keep the EFFE private. They didn't want authorities involved. They didn't want legal consequences for the perpetrators. Again, many older adults will speak of wanting to protect the perpetrator, again, who may be that adult, another adult child, from being prosecuted or the implications, even though they are doing wrong to that person. In some cases, again, the older adults in denial. So trying to, again, understand what those wishes are. And if you're familiar with elder abuse, EFFE specifically, you'll know that many of the things on this list are recognized barriers to why people don't report to authorities. It's because, again, in many cases, the victim doesn't want that to happen. Another key goal for many concerned family members is trying to protect that victim's financial well-being. Obviously, we're talking about financial exploitation here, to try to stop those financial losses, whether it's income, assets, property, protecting that money to pay for current and future needs. And in some cases, really just having the ability to pay the bills, have food on the table. Interestingly enough, I think we had numerous families members in the study who were really concerned about spending down to medical assistance. And that's another issue of itself, but it was interesting how many were concerned about that for a range of reasons, some of which are probably true and some of which aren't, but really trying to prevent that from happening, from their older parent having to be on medical assistance and wanting them to be independent and knowing that the money was being drained for other reasons. And as well as stopping the losses, concerned family members were really trying to recover the lost funds if realistic. And in some cases, they were very successful at that, probably more successful than what you commonly hear from courts or other mandated cases where there's not a lot of success because oftentimes the funds are gone. So those are the big three: protecting the elder. The secondary hopes that a lot of family members talked about, one is preserving family relationships. So trying again to recognize that the events of EFFE are really influencing lots of different relationships. And there's complex dynamics involved here. So you can envision if you have a parent with multiple siblings, you may have in-laws, you may have grandchildren, you may have stepkids, you've got a wide range of individuals who may be involved, who may be affected, both as perpetrators and non-perpetrators. I mentioned the reality of multiple perpetrators. Again, it's not talked about a lot because typically the question is asked, who is the primary perpetrator? Not expecting that there are more than one. In our study, we found, again, this is not representative, but amazingly, I think we found that more than half of the families had multiple perpetrators. And in many cases, there were 3 to 5 perpetrators. Often it was an adult child, that child's spouse, and their child. So across 3 generations, they were 3 people often working together. So the complexity of, again, if you're a concerned family member, you're that other sibling trying to step in, you can envision the dynamics of who's stepping on whose toes, who's right, who's wrong. Some challenging decisions about how do you maintain family functioning and relationships when there are major issues going on. Another task that concerned family members take on is trying to address the perpetrator issues. Again, in following up with the wishes of the victim and wanting to really help that perpetrator. In some cases, again, there are significant mental health issues, addictions that perpetrator needs help with. And that's key to trying to stop some of the EFFE. And again, the desire to really help the perpetrator as much as punish, so to speak, the perpetrator, or trying to hold the perpetrator accountable. So those are the kind of the 5 competing goals. I think very difficult decisions family members talked about, trying to do the right thing again. Some painful choices. And here's a quote from one family member. I felt that I did the right thing by standing up to the perpetrator, who is my sister. I had to tell her, we're revoking your power of attorney. This was my closest sister, and I lost the relationship. But it was empowering to know that by acting early, I saved my mom from experiencing even worse consequences, even though the consequences for me were awful. So oftentimes the family members are put in positions where they have to decide what relationships they're going to protect and who they may be offending. Again, whether it's a niece, nephew, whether it's an in-law, whether it's a sibling. So the impact, again, in making those choices, or at times being pushed to wanting to honor the victim's wishes, but knowing it may not be the best in the long run. So that's a sense of what they're trying to do. Let's move on to help seeking. So what does that involve? What do they really get into? What are some of we found a wide range of tasks and roles that they played. Again, all family contexts and EFFE situations look different. They're very unique. So there's no 2 stories that look the same. But in many cases, again, these are the patterns that we saw. That first of all, for most people, this was a new experience. They had not before stepped in to help somebody deal with EFFE. It involved a huge learning curve. So I think that's the first thing, is most people don't know where to start. They're willing to get involved, but they need a lot of help to know how and where and when. I talked about having or wanting to address the quality of life issues of victims. Again, many were faced with really basic critical things like, where should that older person be living that's safe? How do I find appropriate caregivers? How do I monitor and manage the victim's income and assets? Having to step in and find either trusted others who can help with those income and assets, the financial management, learning it yourself, all of those things. Particularly challenging when the perpetrator was living with the elder and was the caregiver. So again, how do you step in and address that situation when the perpetrator is the caregiver? And that you may not see a lot of options in that, or just really being forced to move an elder or move in with an elder, all of those kinds of things that you think about. So complicated issues that involve some pretty quick decisions and difficult decisions. Help seeking also involved, excuse me, trying to figure out what's going on, what has happened, who is doing what, doing all of those kind of investigative skills that we often think that a professional may be doing. But these are family members. They're trying to, again, track payments, go through checkbooks, go through credit cards, work with experts who can tell you if the signatures are forged on wills and POAs and all of those things. So they're spending a lot of time trying to figure out what's going on and to make a case, so to speak, and follow the perpetrator. They're also involved in being very resourceful. Again, as I said, it's a new experience. Lots and lots of time spent trying to figure out what to do, who can help. As I said, I probably made upwards of 50 phone calls for guidance, and often getting transferred from one place to another. Again, where do you go? Who can help with what? Kinds of questions. Help seeking also involves, in some cases, confronting the perpetrator with evidence and trying to figure out what's next from that vantage point. So being able and willing to really take on what I would think would be a very difficult task of, again, confronting the perpetrator or perpetrators. What happens next? Do they confess? Some did. Are they totally in denial or adversarial? Are some were suicidal when they were confronted? Again, how do you address the complexities of what's going on with that perpetrator as well as the victim? In many cases, and I will say we were guilty of this when we started this project, is that we asked the simple question, well, was EFFE reported or was it not? And by being reported, we were thinking of them being reported to authorities, meaning Adult Protective Services or legal or courts. What help seeking typically involved was navigating a whole range of formal and informal systems. And you can see some of them in this bubble chart. In many cases, a majority remained unreported to authorities, which is, again, that kind of invisible, those invisible cases that we really don't know about because there's no data gathered on them. So in that way, we were delighted to be able to learn about some of those invisible realities, gave us a unique glimpse. But it also reflected kind of that whole complexity of who goes to Adult Protective Services and why, and the challenges of formal systems, or how you may try to keep things private by going to private attorneys, and how many concerned family members really resolve these issues within the family as much as possible without involving others. So what you see is, what we heard is, again, a lot of challenges in trying to figure out who can help in what way, navigating a range of systems that were pretty foreign to most, new experiences, and lots of ups and downs. In some cases, this exploitation had been going on for 10 years. In others, it was a 6-month kind of thing. So a wide range of number of years that individuals had been involved in trying to stop or reverse the exploitation. So that's some sense of what concerned family members are trying to do and the roles and tasks that they're involved in. So I want to pause there and have a sip of coffee, to be honest, and open the window here for some, let's talk about what you heard or what you're learning about some of the practical needs and issues. What are you surprised about anything? What do you see as implications for educators? Focusing on what I've talked about so far. And Lacey, I'm going to let you jump in with, I see there's one comment in here, but because I don't think there's a lot of us on, feel free if you would like to unmute and actually talk. That would be great. So I'm going to open the door to some conversation here.
I think I'm interested by the number of people who want to solve it privately. I think that one, I knew about it, but I don't think it occurred to me just how private some folks would want to keep it.
Yeah, a pretty significant issue, again, as much as we as a society, I guess I would say, focus on involving formal systems and having people who really know what they're doing, investigate and get involved, that may not be the route that people want to go, and understanding why. And then again, from a bigger picture, this goes beyond kind of the role as an educator to really trying to work on some systems change. What needs to happen in the broader work around how do we best intervene, and are there roles for informal as well as formal services? Other comments?
I would say that the point that you made about people stepping in and then losing relationships with siblings or other family members because of their standing up for the older adult in the family is not surprising, but helps me understand that why people would be hesitant to get involved, you know, in order to preserve those relationships that are important to them as well. So I really give a lot of credit for people that are standing up for protecting the older adult in the family, despite the possibility of losing other close relationships.
Yeah, thank you for that. You'll hear me talk about consequences in a second here of how stressful this is and what it could mean. And it's a challenging position to be in, but obviously almost all of these concerned family members say they need to do it to protect the victim. So they're doing it for that sole reason. There's a question in the chat box about what options, if you're a concerned family member and you can't trust each other as siblings, what options for a professional exist to help with finances. And again, I think I'm going to hold that a little bit, but I think that's one of the key educational issues. And I'm just going to move on here a second. I'm not trying to cut the conversation off here too much, but this is kind of one of my lists of what I think of when I've heard the needs. And the second check mark on here is really similar to what you're asking. Is the concerned family members really need to be aware of the money management options and skills. Not only just how to plan in advance, we know we've got lots of work to do around that to help older people plan in advance, whether it's a power of attorney and doing it right and well and other kinds of things, but also what are the options to step in? Who can you, what resources exist in a community if you can't trust other family members and aren't able to take something on yourself? There's all kinds, not all kinds, but there are, there's rep payees, there are a range of terms, and, you may need to resort to guardianship that family members get involved in learning about, the fiduciary roles that you see listed below. Those are all, again, new and different things for many people, particularly guardianship, and trying to learn about what that involves, how much it costs. So the options are not, what would I say, extensive, but there are options, and I think we don't talk about them very much. I think we talk a lot about a power of attorney, but we don't necessarily help people understand that there are a range of other professionals in the community that might be able to help, or financial services that could step in if it's not something a family member is able to do or wants to do. That's not a great answer to your question, but feel free to ask more about that. So some of the practical needs, again, I think are not surprising given what I talked about that, but how do you gather evidence? What do you need to do to document? This is really helping non-professionals be investigators. Again, the money management options, the financial skills, the choices, the decisions, and again, awareness of some of the systems that are out there. Particular issues, again, we saw around the fiduciary, meaning someone that can make decisions for you, that's trusted to make decisions in your best interest. What are those options and choices? And all kinds of issues around decision-making capacity of that victim. How do you decide that? Who decides? What are the laws about that? And again, some of the things we're talking about here will vary by state, because there are state laws that will define technically what EFFE is considered in that state, as well as impact definitions of capacity and guardianship and that kind of thing. Any other quick thoughts on practical needs that you heard in that first segment? Feel free to jump in here. I'm looking at time and getting anxious, so I'm going to move on. So hold your comments I will make sure we have more time. Concerned family members, again, kind of the next piece I want to talk about is, so what does taking on this role and having that wide range of tasks that they're involved in really mean? And not surprisingly, again, one of the key articles, you heard me talk about Breckman's work, one of the key articles that she's written is titled "When Helping Hurts." And I think our research really adds more depth and detail to that helping can really hurt. And it's not that a family member would change their mind about what they did, but recognizing that typically what concerned family members are doing is putting the victim's health and well-being before their own. And you can see some of these quotes really saying, I can handle the consequences, I can handle the perpetrator coming after me, but I don't want him coming after my mom. Being willing to make lots of sacrifices. Again, we talked about relationship sacrifices. What I want to emphasize is the consequences are wide ranging. We heard and had examples of consequences for all 5 dimensions. This is a broad definition of health and well-being that you see me presenting here, whether it's physical, psychological, emotional, social, or economic. We saw consequences of helping on all of those dimensions. And we're talking about, this is the consequences for the family member. So really knowing and recognizing that family members are and can be secondary victims, if you want to think about it that way. They also need support and help. And thinking about what makes their role so stressful, and what, again, I guess I would just say what support they need. So let me share some examples pretty quickly, given time. I'm going to let you read this. This is an adult, this isn't a daughter with a dad that's been exploited, and her comment. Again, we had families who had been trying to tackle EFFE for a long time, 10 years plus, and others who were in the middle of tackling this, and others who were pretty successful in getting involved in a shorter amount of time. But pretty painful situations. Clearly, family members experienced some financial health losses. You can see examples of these. I don't think they would surprise you. And again, I think the key message is really from the quote at the end. I personally took it on. I took the financial hit so that my grandmother wouldn't have to. So it's not as if we heard family members complaining necessarily about the costs they took on, but just recognizing the reality that there are financial hits that the CFM takes. It's hard to sort out, as you know, our health is integrated and affects each other, is interwoven. So here are some examples of health costs that could be physical, emotional, psychological, social, very interrelated. Some of the physical symptoms: loss of sleep. We heard a fair amount, concern for personal safety. So now, in addition to the older victim being facing all kinds of abuse, perhaps, now the concerned family member is the source, is the target, so to speak. Whether it's verbal, emotional, physical, being intimidated, harassed, all kinds of threats to their personal safety. And the whole emotional stress of having to see someone suffer or not being able to do or accomplish what you'd like. We also have lots of isolation going on in many different ways. You can see from the victim, we had that isolation from other family members. I think the most telling stories are those that had to go to court, and some of the cases were actually handled and gone to court, and that you had the concerned family member that testified against all the other family members who were in the courtroom, and feeling that they were now, the concerned family member was now the outlier. They were now considered the bad guy because everyone else sided with the perpetrators. And again, how that must feel and what that might be like, and what emotional stress that would add. I would remind you that I'm going to send you the PowerPoint slides, and there's a few more here that I'm not going to talk about, but if you're interested in learning more about the consequences, there's some in here that talk about the impact on family relationships. And I think it's, again, pretty obvious, but the layers of grief, the way that family members talked about what this experience was like, are pretty powerful and telling about the kinds of support that family members could use. So I encourage you to come back and look at those, because I know I'm rushing at this point. What would make, I'm going to move one more. Oh, I missed something. What makes intervening less stressful? So as you quickly heard me talk about some of the consequences for the range of health issues that family members are experiencing. Again, what do you think are some of the educational possibilities, kind of the ripple effects? What does it mean for support services? This is my list. I would encourage you to think about that and add to this list of what role as educators can we play. Again, I think a lot of the things I have on this list are probably more social support needs that are counseling and literally healthcare. On the other hand, I think part of the process here is helping family members understand the need for self-care in general, and that they need to be prepared for protecting their safety and some of the consequences that may be happening. A quick summary. I hope you can see that concerned family members are playing a critical role. They're really important as what I think of as first responders. I know that some people think, or the reality is you think, why would you rely on a family member when it's a family member that is causing the abuse? But there are family members that are willing again to step up for the victim. And by helping the concerned family member, you're helping the victim. I guess that's really a key point of why would you target concerned family members? Why would you want to support them? Is because ultimately our goal is to help the victims and the primary victims, and knowing that secondary victims are out there in families. So being aware of visible, respect, lots of things we don't know about concerned family members yet, but we do know there's some pretty critical needs. And what are some of the issues around getting involved? Family members talked about being willing to what they wish they would have done or what they wished would have been in place, being willing to act earlier and recognize the signs of EFFE. Again, I think we have various efforts out there as educators to try to say what to look for, what to do, but we need to do a better job of that, specifically for EFFE versus stranger scams. And this is more of a systems change, but again, I think we need to help understand, kind of in policy and practice, that there are professional support. There's professional support that's needed for concerned family members. And we see helplines. We see, again, the New York State's, I would say, is the leading one that has initiated a helpline specifically for concerned family members. So they're targeting them, they're naming them, because not all concerned family members may think they could call a victim hotline because they're not the victim. So increasing the support and recognition. One of the things you will find if you go to the INCRAN site is a blog that got posted this week, and it's on lessons learned. And it's a follow-up again from this research of what it is concerned family members said were important. There's 4 key points there. I encourage you to look at that. I also would encourage you to feel free to use it as a news story, use it as an article, again, respecting that you should cite the author, but it's written in a way that it can be used with the public. So I encourage you to follow up with that as well. I'm going to stop rambling there, not rambling, but I'm going to stop there and open it up for questions and thoughts on what role extension can or should play in helping concerned family members. Feel free again to use the chat or to just unmute and talk to us. Are you all asleep? No, I'm just kidding.
I think some of that planning work for older adults, things they need to be aware of, is probably an important piece. That extension, a role that we could play is trying to help, with that planning for that part of life when, we may be more dependent on others.
Yeah, and I think there are just, we like to think we'll always be independent and able to do things ourselves. And we may, again, know the importance of some documents like a power of attorney. And there's more, I think, information about that, but there's not as much about how do you manage someone else's finances and whether you're a family member or how, or if you're, what services, I'm going to say services, what supportive services are out there. Or again, if you want to take it out of the family and make it a more objective person, what kinds of resources are out there or what kind of options are out there, like guardianship. And I'm not, again, trying to promote guardianship, but in some cases that is the best option for individuals. So that whole range of again, kind of from the financial standpoint, what are the choices and options? And reality is people who are stepping in need to know it quickly, and they need it in one place, right? And a lot of this is just kind of dispersed. It may be that, again, I would expect in most areas that there are potentially a wide variety of collaborators that you might work with that are maybe doing bits and pieces of education, and whether it be, I don't know, legal services in Minnesota. We have a really wonderful Minnesota Elder Justice Center that does all kinds of training for consumers as well as others. They get into a lot of fiduciary details, and they have attorneys on staff that know some of those details. They may not know all the family dynamics, but so I think there's some really good collaborators and some teams that you could pull together. Other thoughts? Did you learn anything new?
The real stories, I think, are what tug at people's hearts, and when people can share the story. But how do you have to find the right persons that are willing to share their journey and what happened. So are you aware of any videos, YouTubes, anything of someone sharing a testimonial of what happened?
That is a tough one. And I will tell you, that's the first thing media wants, right? Find me a person really that I can interview. And like, yeah, no. Well, in many cases, because of obviously ethics, I'm not going to do that. But I think of one video that, again, if you email me, I'd be glad to tell you about it. It was done in Minnesota by the Elder Justice Center, and it does have a gentleman talking about his family experience and others. It was a brother, they happened to be police officer, and there was all kinds of dynamics. So he is telling his story. Probably the most dramatic that I know of actually was a media story, and it is a case that, and I say this, it was prosecuted, and they interviewed the son who was a perpetrator, and it's really dramatic. He says, I love my mother. I never did anything wrong. And anyway, it's just like, oh my gosh. Anyway.
Arlene,
yes.
There was a question about, would having a living trust help protect elders from EFFE?
Great question. Maybe, maybe not. Again, I know we're over time here, so if you need to go, I'm gonna do this next slide and then I'll keep talking here and answer that question. For those of you who need to go, I really hope that you take a few brief minutes and do this evaluation and help us know how today was for you and pay attention to the next webinar. But let me get back to that. So one of the issues that one of the things we learned again in this study is we were curious how many people had different kinds of planning documents, how many older people were in fact prepared. And amazingly, a lot of them had already had wills, trusts, power of attorney, but they didn't protect them from the EFFE. So as much as we promote planning, it's like, whoa, what went wrong here? And actually a coworker and I were just talking about that. We need to dive into that data and understand what went wrong. We know some of those pieces. We know that exploiters can be really good at manipulating and changing those documents, working with their own attorneys. Even though the elder has incapacity, things get changed. Illegally, I would say, but they get changed. So part of the planning process needs to be doing it well and doing it right and picking the right people to be the power of attorney. Again, a lot of people are picking the wrong person in terms of personality or past behavior or whatever. So that's a really quick answer to that. But if you would like to chat more about that, feel free to give me a call or contact me. Again, I want to respect our time. So thank you for joining in. Again, I'm able to stay on here a few minutes. If you have other questions, I'd be glad.